talk, then you need to be listening to the Garlic Fries and Baseball Guys podcast. Sam Love and Joe Shasky bring you the best Giants talk in the Bay Area all season long. Hear in-depth analysis and insights as well as exclusive interviews with players like Mike Krzyzewski, who just hit the 10-day IL. But good news here for the Roasters. There's no curse on Heliot Ramos. He went 3 for 4 yesterday with a walk. He got on base 4 times in 5 plate appearances. He is back, baby. Back. Let's go, Ramos. New episode available now. Subscribe today on iTunes, Spotify, and the free Odyssey app. By the way, shout out to our friends at Flowing Water Plumbing and Drain. If you're going to call it to the roast, you better bring it, because if you don't, you will be flush punching by Flowing Water Plumbing and Drain. And a lot of controversy on YouTube and the Infinity mobile text line.
Over what?
Bonte, how come you didn't flush Rob and San Bruno? Rob was passionate. It started off as a good call. We may not agree with the take, because I don't agree with the take. But was it a terrible phone call?
Ironic that Rob in San Bruno turned into Jimmy Garoppolo in the fourth quarter of a playoff game by the end of his call.
Jimmy.
I love you, Rob. Somewhere you're out there, you know I love you.
He's got a baseball bat in his ear listening to all this.
Yeah,
shit.
he does.
Downfall is near, and it's coming hard.
Oh. All right, so before we got Brett Siegel on the line. Should I play Zach Lowe real quick? Or no, we'll wait. We'll get Brett Siegel. Let's get Brett Siegel. We got some Clay sound from Zach Lowe. Zach Lowe on Klay Thompson. And I mean, he's going to say something that we already know, but we'll play it anyway after Brett Siegel from Clutch Points, reporter for Clutch, National NBA insider Brett Siegel. And Brett, good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Roast here on 95.7 The Game. Joe Shasky, the Butcher, Bonte Hill. And you made the moves, man. You made Twitter jump the other day. And you had the internet buzzing because you said a team to look out for when it comes to Paul George is the Golden State Warriors. So why do you think the Golden State Warriors are a team we need to watch in the sweepstakes for Paul George?
Well, good morning to you guys as well. It's a great day, great week ahead of us, and there's a lot of NBA stuff going on, man. I mean, we got the draft tomorrow. We have free agency right after that, followed by Summer League. So it's just one thing after another right now. And, of course, at the center of the NBA world, as always, is the Golden State Warriors. And you mentioned it. We have those rumors of Paul George possibly being pursued by the Golden State Warriors. How true is this? Can it actually happen? There's a lot that goes into play here. And obviously the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is the cap numbers and the tax line, because the Warriors have notoriously been one of the largest cap teams, one of the largest tax-paying teams in the league. And now they actually have options for once entering this offseason. They have Kevon Looney and Gary Payton both opting into their contracts, both movable contracts and trades. You have Chris Paul's $30 million contract that is yet to be guaranteed. That could be included in trades. And then the big elephant in the room is Klay Thompson's situation in free agency. There's talk that he could potentially pursue other opportunities and hear offers from other teams. Is that just a leverage play for him to get his price from the Warriors? Will he actually leave the Warriors and put his legacy on the line there? These are all things circulating in Golden State right now. And these are all questions that their front office are trying to find answers to leading up to the draft pertaining to Paul George. His situation is very similar with the Clippers in terms of Thompson potentially leaving the Warriors. Paul George could realistically leave the Clippers this offseason, and it's looking more and more as if this could be an opt-in and trade. He's entering the final year of his contract at $48.7 million if he opts in to that player option. And it seems like right now he's unhappy with Los Angeles that they haven't given him the Kawhi Leonard type deal that he has been seeking. And it does seem like that new opportunity could be on the horizon for George.
Okay, you just gave a great summary of our show over the last month of Warrior Talk. Is Paul George staying with the Clippers?
I would lean towards no right now. Based on everything that I'm hearing and seeing from other reporters out there, it truly does seem like that Paul George's situation is not as tight as it used to be with the Clippers. I mean, when we first entered the offseason and when the Clippers lost in the playoffs, it seemed like that there would be a way for them to find neutral ground here, maybe give them slightly less than what Kawhi Leonard got on a new deal, and they would be able to figure things out. Steve Ballmer always willing to pay up for his team to be a championship contender, but the Clippers haven't budged on their price for Paul George. They don't want to pay him more than they paid Kawhi, and they haven't even offered him the same contract as Kawhi got on his extension, and that's kind of rubbed Paul George and his camp the wrong way. This is a guy that has been the leader of the team when Kawhi Leonard has been hurt. He's stepped up at different times, obviously. He's disappeared at different points in the playoffs, which are a concern, and that's probably where the Clippers are coming from with their negotiation tactics here with Paul George. But if I had to give a definitive answer of is Paul George leaving this offseason, I would lean more towards yes. And if I had to put a percentage, I would say right now it's probably 60-40 that Paul George is going to leave.
Okay. Is he real quick, because I have a follow-up question. Is he opting in or opting out, if you had to guess?
I would say opting in, and the reason I say that is because there's more options for the Clippers if he opts in, where you have teams that can give you back assets in return to keep you as a championship contender. The Clippers are fine being a team that pays the highest tax in the league. And like I mentioned, Steve Ballmer's never afraid to pay for his championship team. And he really envisions this team being able to do that in the new Intuit Dome. So I think that if Paul George opts in, I think there's a very realistic situation that he's traded. If he opts out, there's still the possibility that he could re-sign with the Clippers.
What is a trade package? What kind of trade package could the Warriors offer that would intrigue the Clippers?
That's the biggest question. And we heard the other day Mike Dunleavy Jr. talk about how he wants to see this team have a lot of internal growth. And basically for Warriors fans, that comes down to, we want to keep Jonathan Kuminga. We want to keep Brandon Pajemski. We want to really develop these young guys because the older core isn't getting any younger. Stephen Curry, 36 years old. Draymond Green, he's going to be 35 this upcoming year. So you have these guys kind of on the back end of their career. We've seen them contend for championships, win championships over the last decade. But all good things come to an end at some point, and you have to have that plan in place of who's going to be stepping up to be those next guys to take over the reins of the franchise. Do I think that they would trade Kuminga or Pajemski? I don't think they would unless they were getting a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, for example. And I'm not saying that he's available on the open market or in the trade market, because that's not the case whatsoever. But that's the kind of player that the Warriors would want to give up their core young players for. In terms of Paul George, what would a trade look like? Well, you immediately turn to Chris Paul and that $30 million contract, that non-guaranteed contract that the Warriors have to make a decision on fairly soon. And that holds a lot of weight, not only because Chris Paul wanted to go back to the Clippers before he was traded to the Warriors, that there was mutual interest there, but it's also the fact that that's an expiring contract that the Clippers can then turn around for more assets. It's a contract that opens up flexibility next offseason. So right there, that's the bulk of the trade. And then where I look at Gary Payton and Kevon Looney. If you include those two right there, that gets you to the threshold to absorb Paul George's $48 million contract. Is that a deal that the Warriors would want to do? It really depends on Klay Thompson's situation. If Thompson's not coming back, you're going to have to scramble and get another option. I think that Paul George would be an excellent fit next to Stephen Curry and Draymond. But from the Clippers' perspective, is that going to be enough for you? You're getting no young talent.
I was going to ask you, Brett, not to cut you off, Brett Siegel, National NBA Insider, reporter for Clutch Points. I was going to ask you that. What would the Clippers want? They're going to just want CP3 and Moody and Looney. The Clippers are in it to win it too, right?
Right, and that's the thing is, does Gary Payton move the needle for you? Does Kevon Looney move the needle for you? Those are guys that aren't going to be in your starting rotation, so that makes up your bench. And then obviously Chris Paul, you'd still have James Harden, who they're most likely going to re-sign. So it's not as feasible from the Clippers' perspective of trading Paul George to the Warriors. But if there's not many other suitors out there and Paul George wants to move, he doesn't want to be there anymore, it's a situation that could play out, especially if they get another team involved in this.
Let me see. Philadelphia, I know the Sixers are in early on Paul George. I've heard rumors that maybe they're not so in on Paul George. What if he did opt out and say, I want to be a free agent? Would he be able to get big-time money or years? Because it sounds like the years is the problem, not necessarily the money with the Clippers. He wants long-term stability, not necessarily the same type of money as Kawhi. So would he opt out and say, you know what, I'll go to Philadelphia and play for $25, $30 million a year?
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't see Paul George taking below, honestly, anywhere below $35 million. I think that would be pretty generous for him to go back to the Clippers and say that he would take less than that. If he does opt out, though, I do still think that the 76ers are a team that are on Paul George's radar. I think that there would be interest there from the 76ers to bring him in next to Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And contrary to some reports out there, I do think that that's still a feasible landing spot. I think that if he opts out, they have the cap space to sign him, and they can give him that 3-4 year deal that he wants. Now, whether or not they would be willing to give him a 4-year deal, I'm not too sure about that. I think that if on the open market and free agency, I think that Paul George would more than likely get offers of a 3-year deal with a player option in that final season. But in terms of a 4-year contract, we're talking about a guy that is an all-star in this league, But Paul George himself is 34 years old. So do you really want to invest max money in a guy and pay him over $50 million a year in that fourth year? I think that's a question that many teams are kind of scratching their head on.
Yeah, I got a question about a sign-and trade with Clay, but also Paul George, if you did that hypothetical you threw out with the trade with GP2 and Looney and CP3 and Wiggins, how much better would the Warriors be with Paul George? Because they were a playing team last year. You look at the landscape of the Western Conference, Minnesota, Denver, Dallas. We know about OKC up and coming. You got a lot of teams. Memphis is going to get Ja Morant back. Wemby's coming down in San Antonio. Who the hell knows what they're going to do? How much better are the Warriors in the West with Paul George?
I think it slightly improves their chances, and obviously that's not what Warriors fans want to hear if they're giving up all these guys for him. But for the Warriors, it's going to come down to who they can get on the open market on these minimum contracts. Are there veterans out there that are going to be willing to take less money to play with Stephen Curry, to play with Paul George if you traded for him, to play with Draymond? And there are actually some very interesting names that are going to be free agents out there. Guys like DeAnthony Melton, DeLon Wright, Gary Harris, Alec Burks, Torrey Craig. Those are guys that can be key secondary parts of a championship contending team. And I think that's really where the Warriors, regardless of if they make a star trade or whether or not they bring back Clay, I think that that's where the bulk of this roster needs to be built. And that's where the point of emphasis needs to be put on heading into the offseason if this team truly has championship aspirations and they're not going to take a step back and just look towards the future. If this team wants to remain in that championship conversation in the Western Conference, it's got to start with those minimum contracts. They got to be willing to bring in some of those guys.
All right, Brett Siegel, National NBA Insider reporter for Clutch Points. We'll be looking at your Twitter account for updates. Good stuff as always. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. You guys take care. Have a great week.
You too. Brett Siegel, National NBA Insider and reporter for Clutch.